Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. I always knew the day would come when I'd say no. I just didn't expect it to be in front of 40 people and a box of stale donuts. My name is Danny Ortega. I'm 31. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and until exactly 10:16 a.m. that morning, I worked in marketing at a mid-sized ad agency called Chandler and Rollins. It was supposed to be a team accountability meeting, whatever that means. Weekly Wednesday cattle call. Everyone crammed into the third-floor conference room, pretending to care while we listened to the same three people talk. I took a seat like always, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other. Kept my head down, like always. Mr. Rollins, yes, he insists on the Mr., stood at the front, flanked by his lapdog, Mitch, and my direct supervisor, Ms. Blake. Mitch had that smug little chin tilt he gets when he thinks something spicy is about to happen. That should have tipped me off. "So," Rollins said, flipping through a packet of printed reports like it was some crime scene evidence. "Looks like we had another mishap with the Quinn account. Anyone care to explain why the presentation materials were 2 days late?" He looked around the room, eyes landing right on me. I kept my tone even. "That was Mitch's account. I flagged the delay last Friday." That was true. I had the emails to prove it, but that wasn't the answer he wanted. Rollins slapped the papers onto the table. "So you're saying you knew there was a delay and didn't fix it?" My pen froze mid-note. "I'm saying I flagged it." "And you didn't take initiative to clean it up?" he barked, as if he were catching me in some lie. "Danny, you've always been the one who keeps this place running. What happened?" That's when Ms. Blake chimed in. "It's part of your role to support the team, Danny. We count on you to keep the wheels greased." I blinked. "By fixing other people's mistakes?" She gave me that tight, pitying smile that always makes my blood pressure spike. "Mitch is under a lot of pressure." "Everyone's under pressure," I said, voice quiet but steady. Rollins didn't like that. He leaned across the table, red-faced. "You've always been dependable, Danny. I don't know who you think you're pulling this stunt now." "It's not a stunt," I said, closing my notebook. He slammed his palm on the table, making a few people jump. "This is insubordination." Mitch chuckled under his breath, loud enough that I heard it. I looked at him, then back at Rollins. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just packed my things, closed my laptop, slid my pen into the notebook's spiral, and stood up. No one said a word. I tucked my chair in, turned around, and walked out. Not fast, not like I was storming off. Just quiet. Cold, like I was finally done pretending to be grateful for the whip they'd handed me. The door clicked shut behind me. That was the last time I sat in that room. I was 22 when I started at Chandler and Rollins. Fresh out of college, still blinking from graduation photos and handshakes, I walked into that office like I was lucky to even be allowed through the front door. They didn't pay interns much, barely enough for gas and frozen pizza, but I showed up every morning like it was my dream job. Back then, I thought if I just worked hard enough, someone would notice. That was the lie I fed myself every night. As I stayed late editing pitch decks, no one would admit I'd touched. The first time they asked me to stay past hours, it was framed like a compliment. "Danny, you're just so detail-oriented. Mind giving this one last pass before tomorrow's meeting?" It wasn't my account. I wasn't even technically part of the team, but I smiled and nodded and stayed until midnight fixing someone else's numbers. No one said thank you, but the next day they handed me the exact same file and said, "You're so good at this. You really get the company vibe." That was the beginning. By month 3, I was the unofficial party planner. Birthdays, baby showers, welcome lunches. I ran to Target during my lunch break and picked up sheet cake and balloons while Mitch got praised for building a collaborative team culture. I once bought and assembled a standing desk for the office manager using my own money. I told myself it was a good look, that it would help me stand out. It did, just not in the way I hoped. I became the girl who made things happen, who just knew what needed doing. When Mitch was hungover before a client presentation, I stayed up late ghostwriting the pitch he barely glanced at. He gave the presentation the next day, eyes glassy, smile perfect. They clapped. I got a Starbucks gift card. I told myself it was something. Every request for promotion was met with the same line. "Danny, we'd be lost without you." Then came the quieter part. "But you're just not quite leadership material," as if being good at everything was disqualifying, as if I hadn't already been leading from behind for years. They said I had a great attitude, that I was reliable, that I kept morale high. I learned early on that my value wasn't in my ideas. It was in making other people's ideas look better. That if I made things easier for everyone else, they'd eventually reward me. They didn't. By year 2, my name had disappeared from the email threads. I became the ghost in the machine. The "can you help me real quick?" before every major deadline. I once designed a full campaign concept for a beauty brand in 2 days flat. Mitch submitted it under his name. The team applauded. He bought himself new headphones with the bonus. I bought donuts for the office. I wasn't invisible. I was indispensable. And somehow, that made me easier to ignore. But back then, I didn't walk out. I leaned in, and they loved me for it. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with a meltdown or a slammed door. It came quietly, the way a rope frays, one thin thread at a time. It started with a spreadsheet. One night, I stayed late, as usual, fixing Mitch's campaign tracker for the quarter. I opened the file and found a note in the margin that read, "Can Danny just clean this up?" That was it. No context. No thank you. Just an expectation. Like I was a function, not a person. That night, I started a folder on my desktop called Just in Case. I had no plan. Not really. I just wanted a place to put the evidence of how much I did, how little they noticed, and how often they took it for granted. Every time I fixed someone else's mistake, I logged it. Every time Mitch forwarded me an urgent client issue with no subject line or explanation, I copied the email. Every time Ms. Blake passed my idea off as a group contribution, I added a note. By the end of the first week, the folder had over 50 items. Once I started writing it down, I couldn't stop seeing it. The hours I spent rewriting client copy so Rollins could present it as his brainstorm. The nights I stayed logged into Slack past 11, answering questions from interns and smoothing over vendor complaints. The morning I got to the office early and saw a broken coffee machine, cleaned it, ordered a new one, and never even mentioned it. No one asked why the coffee worked again. They just poured a cup and kept walking. I wasn't just helpful, I was essential. But only if I kept quiet about it. I stopped refilling the snack bar 1 week just to see what would happen. On Thursday, someone from HR sent a Slack message. "Hey Danny, any idea why we're out of protein bars again?" I didn't reply. On Friday, Blake called me less approachable than usual during our one-on-one, so I added that too. Then I started turning my phone off after 6 p.m., just turned it off and left it in the kitchen drawer. The first time I did it, I barely slept. I kept reaching for it, certain I'd missed some fire I needed to put out. Nothing happened. The world didn't burn. The office didn't collapse. People just adjusted, but not without comments. I overheard Mitch one afternoon outside the break room saying, "Danny's gotten kind of weird lately, like she's not trying anymore." Ms. Blake responded, "She used to be the glue, you know? Now it's like she doesn't care." I wrote that down too. What none of them seemed to realize was that I wasn't doing less. I was just doing what I was paid to do. No more, no less. They called it uncooperative. I called it fair. The folder grew thicker. I gave it a name, Invisible Weight. Some days I'd open it and stare at the timeline I'd made, a cascading list of little indignities that added up to a career. I didn't feel angry when I looked at it. I felt tired. Just tired in my bones. That was when I knew. This wasn't burnout. This was clarity. They never gave me a job. They gave me a burden and called it gratitude. So I started preparing to put it down. They called it a follow-up. Said it would be brief, a chance to clear the air after the previous week's meeting, the one where I'd said no. But when I walked into the conference room and saw the whole leadership team already seated, I knew exactly what it was. A trial. Rollins sat at the head of the table, palms steepled like he was hosting a deposition. Blake to his right, Mitch, of course, directly across from me, sipping from his branded tumbler, like this was a casual catch-up. The rest of the team sat stiffly around the edges, eyes darting between notepads and floor tiles. I took the only open seat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. It didn't take long. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Mitch started, leaning forward like he was doing everyone a favor. "It's become increasingly difficult to rely on Danny." Blake nodded immediately. "You used to be the most reliable person on staff." "What happened to that Danny?" "That Danny," I thought, was exhausted. "She's been cold," Mitch continued, detached. "I've had to redo multiple drafts because she wasn't willing to collaborate." I felt a flicker of something. Maybe anger, maybe boredom. I couldn't tell anymore. I just stared at the table, at the stack of fake leather notebooks someone had bought for the team last quarter. Rollins cleared his throat, adjusting his tie with exaggerated precision. Danny, your silence the past few weeks has not gone unnoticed. We gave you space to recalibrate, but what we need now is accountability. I still didn't speak. Undermining team morale, he said, his voice gaining steam, is a serious concern. We've built a culture of trust here, and your recent behavior, it's created tension, fear. Fear. Right. Blake leaned in. We're offering you the chance to take responsibility, Danny. A simple apology goes a long way. The word hung in the air like a threat. I looked up, slowly, calmly. No, Rollins blinked. Excuse me? I'm not apologizing. He stared at me like I'd just spit in his coffee. So that's your final word? I nodded once, then came the hand, flat against the table, a loud slap that made someone in the back flinch. Security, he said sharply, not looking at anyone. Escort her out. I stood, picked up my bag, walked toward the door. Behind me, someone muttered, not loudly, but loud enough. She'll be back. She needs us. I didn't turn around. Let them think what they wanted. Let them wait. I wasn't coming back. Serena didn't ask questions. She just opened her apartment door, stepped aside, and handed me a blanket. You can stay, she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I nodded once, still holding the bag I'd packed in 10 minutes flat. Just my laptop, a charger, and a few clothes. I hadn't cried since the office. I still didn't. I think something inside me was too quiet for tears. Her place was small, a second-floor walk-up in Tempe, filled with plants that had no business surviving, and one very fat orange cat who eyed me with suspicion from the arm of the couch. The space smelled like eucalyptus and laundry detergent. I hadn't realized how much I missed clean air. I slept on that couch. It sagged in the middle and squeaked when I rolled over, and by morning my spine felt like it had been rearranged. But still, it was the best sleep I'd had in months. No Slack pings, no pre-dawn alarms, no calendar invites marked urgent. Just stillness. When I woke up, there were scrambled eggs on a plate and coffee in a chipped ceramic mug that read, World's Okayest Person. Serena's sister Casey was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she chopped strawberries. She glanced up and gave me a soft smile. I make too much breakfast when I'm anxious, she said. Which is always. You hungry? I nodded. I hadn't eaten since noon the day before. But it wasn't just the food. It was the way she handed me the plate like I was a person, not a burden. No one in that apartment expected anything from me. No reports, no answers, no emotional performance. Just eat. I sat at the little kitchen table, sunlight spilling across my hands, and for the first time in years, I felt my shoulders start to relax. My phone had 21 unread emails, mostly from HR subject lines like follow-up regarding separation and clarification requested. I didn't open any of them. One was from Blake, just 3 lines. Danny, this isn't how we hoped things would go. Please reconsider. No greeting, no apology, just the familiar pull of obligation dressed up as concern. I deleted it without reading further. The cat jumped into my lap sometime around mid-morning and refused to leave. Serena called her Clementine, said she only sat on people who needed grounding. I didn't argue. Later that afternoon, I walked to the corner store and bought a notebook. The cheap kind with the flimsy cover and the thin blue lines. I didn't know what I was going to write yet, but I knew I would write something, because the silence I used to carry like a punishment now felt like permission. Permission to be still. Permission to rest. Permission, finally, to begin. The first thing I did was rename the desktop folder. I'd been calling it Invisible Weight, but that wasn't quite right anymore. It wasn't weight, it was record. It was proof. I changed the name to Tasks Completed Without Recognition, Year 1 Ter 5. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. I started from the beginning. Year 1. The spreadsheet I fixed in my first month. The one Mitch had botched so badly, a client almost walked away. I had emails. One where I said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," sent at 11:47 p.m. Another where Mitch replied, "Thanks, you're a lifesaver." Then, the next week, a company-wide email where he took credit for pulling late nights to secure the account. Copy-paste. Next came the event planning, holiday party details, vendor receipts, office birthday budgets that Blake submitted under her name. I had Slack messages, invoices, even a photo of me on the floor inflating balloons while everyone else sipped champagne. I added it all. The slide decks I wrote from scratch, but weren't mine. The client decks Mitch sent from his email with my metadata stripped out. the slogans that ended up on billboards with no byline, even the toner orders, the days I'd restock the printer cabinet without a word, even though technically that was facility's job. I built a timeline, clean, factual, bullet-pointed, no emotion, no interpretation, just a list of what I'd done and when, followed by screenshots, Slack messages, forwarded emails, calendar invites. I formatted it all into a polished PDF, complete with headers and footnotes. I called it a ledger because that's what it was, a record of value long overdue. And the truth was, I wasn't angry. I was clear. There's a moment when you've been gaslit long enough, where documenting the truth becomes a kind of healing, not so anyone else believes it, but so you remember you're not crazy, that you didn't imagine it, that you were there, that you built it, that it happened. I worked on it for 3 days, not all at once, just in slow, steady pieces. When I needed a break, I walked around the block, ate toast, rubbed Clementine's belly, let Serena's Spotify playlists fill the quiet. Every time I came back to my laptop, I felt stronger. On the final night, I added a cover page. Tasks completed without recognition. Danny Ortega, 2017-2022, documented labor, unacknowledged work, misattributed contributions. Then I pressed save. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even vindication. It was reality. In writing, at last. I closed the lid on my laptop, sat back, and exhaled. For the first time, maybe ever, I felt like the story had been told, even if no one read it. I had, and that was enough to start. It started with a text from Serena. You didn't hear this from me, but Mitch missed a huge deadline. Quinn account went to another firm. I read it twice before locking my phone and sliding it face down on the kitchen table. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just stared at my coffee while Clementine purred under my chair. 2 days later, another message. New intern quit said, "This place is chaos." Walked out before lunch, Serena worked 2 floors above my old department. She didn't dig for gossip. It just floated her way now. Funny how silence makes room for whispers. Apparently, Rollins had started showing up late. Disheveled, short-tempered. Once, he snapped at a client on a Zoom call and forgot he wasn't muted. Blake was juggling 3 roles at once and still finding time to passive-aggressively forward feedback surveys to junior staff. No one said my name, not out loud. But the cracks were showing. Small things started breaking. Client decks that didn't get proofed, expense reports filed with the wrong numbers, files saved in the wrong folders. Nothing dramatic, just the systems I used to quietly manage, now abandoned. Serena heard from someone in HR that a vendor had complained about a missed payment. A week later, an internal notice went out. Please be patient as we restructure workflows and communication expectations. Translation: no one knew who was supposed to do what. I'd lived in that structure for years. Kept it humming like a machine. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I believed it was what made me valuable. Now the machine was sputtering, and all I'd done was step away. Serena and I met up for coffee one morning. She slid into the booth and said, "You caused a vacuum?" I raised an eyebrow. I didn't cause anything. I left. "Exactly," she said. "That was the vacuum." I didn't reply. I just watched the steam curl from her cup. That's the thing about people like me. We're not flashy. We don't make noise. We just keep things from falling apart. Quietly, invisibly, endlessly. Until we stop. And when we do, people don't know how to explain what's missing. So they don't. They just feel the gap and try to patch it with the wrong tools. The funny part? They still hadn't reached out. Not to apologize. Not to ask for help. Maybe they thought silence meant I'd come back on my own. Maybe they thought they were punishing me by pretending I never existed. But I wasn't waiting for recognition anymore. The system was collapsing, and my name wasn't in the rubble. That was the win. The binder was navy blue. Clean. Professional. The kind you'd use for a board presentation or a quarterly report. The kind they respected. I bought it from an office supply store down the street, the same one I used to walk to during lunch breaks when I needed to clear my head. Back then, I'd browse pens and planners to feel like I had control over something. This time, I walked out with purpose. When I got back to Serena's apartment, I opened the binder and slid in the first page. Tasks completed without recognition, year 1 to 5. Underneath, in smaller type, compiled by Danny Ortega. Supporting documentation enclosed. Then I printed everything, all 5 years of proof. My name on pitch drafts, dots, emails showing timestamps on weekends. internal memos that included my suggestions reworded and repackaged, Slack screenshots where Mitch typed, "Can you just polish this before I send?" Followed by a forwarded final deck with his name front and center. Each section had tabs: client work, misattributed labor, outside job scope, ghostwriting and decks, event planning, office management communications, requests, praise, erasure. It was factual, neat, and damning. No rants, no accusations, just the truth, laid bare. I included testimonials from 3 former interns. I'd reached out carefully, explaining I was collecting statements about workplace dynamics. All 3 responded within a day. Danny was the only reason I stayed the summer. She taught me more than my actual manager. I was told to direct all questions to her, but she wasn't listed as my supervisor. I thought she was. She handled everything and got 0 credit. Everyone knew it. I blacked out their names, protected them. They'd already learned what happened to people who spoke too loudly. On a flash drive, I copied every file, time-stamped folders, dated versions of decks, even the raw campaign drafts I'd written and watched Mitch upload as his own. I didn't leave a note. No cover letter. No, "I hope this finds you well." I wanted the work to speak for itself, just this once. The only thing I added, taped discreetly to the inside front cover, was a copy of a company-wide email from Blake dated 3 years earlier. "We couldn't do what we do without Danny keeping us running. She's the glue." Let them read that after going through the rest. I sealed the binder in a padded envelope, dropped the flash drive in with it, and wrote one address in neat block letters across the front: Chandler and Rollins Board of Directors, ATTN, Executive Oversight. No return address. Then I walked it to the nearest mailbox and slid it in. No one saw me. No one would know it came from me. At least, not right away. That part didn't matter. That night, I applied to a small creative startup I'd followed for years. They focused on collaborative strategy and freelance work. No hierarchy, no titles, just people doing the work together. I clicked Submit and closed the tab. The binder was out of my hands now. But the story, that was still mine. The email came on a Wednesday morning. Subject line, Re-engagement opportunity. I almost deleted it on site. Thought it was another HR message trying to walk back what couldn't be undone. But the sender wasn't Rollins, wasn't Blake. It was someone I didn't recognize. Alexis Nguyen, board liaison, Chandler and Rollins. I clicked it open, half out of curiosity, half out of spite. Ms. Ortega, following an internal review, we would like to formally extend an offer to rejoin the company in a new role. Senior strategist, creative operations, full benefits, full salary, leadership track, direct access to board-level initiatives. We understand that circumstances were less than ideal. We're hoping to correct that. Let us know if you'd be open to a conversation. No pressure. Alexis. There was no mention of what triggered the review, no explanation, no apology. But I knew. I closed the tab and didn't respond. Serena was pouring coffee at the kitchen counter when I looked up from my screen. "They finally noticed?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. She didn't ask what I was going to do. She already knew. By the end of that week, word spread. Rollins had stepped down. Voluntarily, of course. Mitch was still there, but on a performance improvement plan. Blake had apparently taken a sudden leave of absence to focus on wellness. And me? I signed a contract with my first solo client, a mid-sized design agency that needed help rebranding their pitch process. The kind of work I used to do between 10 other things, under someone else's name. Now it was mine. Start to finish. The client's CEO was a woman named Lauren. She said things like, "Take the lead on this," and "Your voice matters." On our first call, she asked what hours I like to work and whether I preferred Zoom or phone. I didn't know how to answer at first. I had never been asked before. There were no free lunches, no rooftop parties, no mission statements printed on walls, just deadlines, decisions, and respect. It felt quiet, clean, real. I got a follow-up email from Alexis a week later. "Just checking in, Danny? We'd love to speak. Your contributions were deeply valued. No hard feelings. Just silence." I clicked Archive. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't interested in being welcomed back into a system that only noticed I existed when it started falling apart. I didn't want the title or the office or the plaque with my name on it. I didn't want their recognition now that it served them. I had something better. Every meeting I accepted, every client I chose. It was on my terms. Every word I wrote had my name on it. I wasn't invisible anymore, and I didn't need their permission to stay that way. Every Friday night, I'd light a candle. No reason, no ceremony, just something simple. A small white flame in a dollar store jar on the corner of my desk. It started the first week after I turned down the offer. I was sitting in my apartment, the windows open, a breeze cutting through the silence like it had someplace to be. I lit the candle without thinking, just to keep the room from feeling empty. Now it's a ritual. Quiet mine. The apartment is small, but it's enough. The walls are bare, save for one corkboard filled with sticky notes and scribbled timelines. My desk faces the window. I like to watch the sky change while I work. Pinks fading to deep blue, the glow of porch lights blinking on, one by one. I don't wait for texts anymore, or emails from old coworkers asking if I'll come back. They've stopped sending them. The silence used to feel like punishment. Now it feels like peace. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if Mitch ever figured out how to organize a pitch deck, if Blake still talks about team spirit with that sharp little smile, if Rollins still yells when the coffee machine breaks, or if someone new finally told him to fix it himself. But I don't dwell. I don't follow company updates. I don't Google them. I don't check LinkedIn. Their chaos is no longer mine to carry. Now, I work with clients who respect the weight of my words. I make my own calendar. I choose the projects I take. I charge what I'm worth. Not because I demand it, but because they offer it first. Last week, a client called just to say thank you, not for saving the day, not for picking up someone else's slack. Just thank you. For the ideas, for the time, for being honest. I didn't know what to say. I stood there in my kitchen, barefoot, phone against my ear, and realized I'd spent so long waiting to be seen that I forgot what it felt like to simply be. That night, I lit the candle early. It flickered softly beside my laptop as I typed out a new proposal. No pressure, no oversight, just work I cared about, done on my own terms. I used to carry silence like a punishment, something I had to bear to prove I belonged. Now, I choose it, protect it, cultivate it. Some people burn bridges. I lit a flame, small, steady, my own. And every week, when I strike the match and watch that wick catch, I remember I didn't walk out of the room to be loud. I walked out to be free.